It's time to take command with former NFL tight end Logan Paulsen and former Commanders beat reporter Craig Hoffman.
If I'm doing the projecting, I see with an optimistic view, such as Curtis. How often Logan did last year we talk about Curtis Samuel being like the canary in the coal mine.
Yeah,
and there were games where he just was completely uninvolved. That doesn't happen in Kansas City with Tyreek Hill, with some of the, even like Jerick McKinnon. Like they have guys that they're like, we need to get them these specific touches each and every weekend because they're going to move the chains or, God forbid, score. And when everyone loves to point out that they only averaged 17.7 points per game last year, it's like, well, what happens if they make a concerted effort to get the ball to the guys who are good at, when they have the ball? I would think they'd score more. And I think that's going to be a part of the offense. And it's kind of nuts that it wasn't last year, but it wasn't. And the insulation of the offensive line and all of those things offensively. But then there's this whole other wild concept that they have a defense that's really good, and that hasn't changed almost at all. For all of the projection that we have on the offensive side of the ball, they have the same defensive coordinator, they have the same defensive core, and they've hopefully added some pieces that could, if they pan out, could significantly upgrade the defense, and if not, are probably going to be similar level to what they saw last year. Those pieces being Emmanuel Forbes, but also Chase Young. Like if Chase goes out and has a good year, how much better is this defense? If not, you're playing a lot of James Smith-Williams and Casey Toohill and guys that played last year at the level that we saw them produce at last year. Same thing, Emmanuel Forbes on the outside. If he's great, he's getting turnovers. They're a totally different defense in a good way. If not, he's a rookie. He's probably getting his snaps reduced. And Benjamin St-Juste and Kendall Fuller, a.k.a. the guys that played last year, are probably out there. And I think that's my biggest, what is everyone talking about with this team is not the projection offensively, because it can't get a lot worse than it was last year because of all the reasons everyone said. But there's a floor on this team of the defense that, to me at least, looks like it's going to be very similar to last year unless there's injuries or, other unforeseen circumstances, not a lot of room to go down and a ton of room to go up.
Yeah. And I think that's because you're also getting, is the D-line rotation strengthened with a guy like Fedarian Mathis back in the rotation, and John Ridgeway in a second year in this system, because Ridgeway's not a playmaker per se, but he'll be better in year 2 with this and as a rotation guy. So your rotation is stronger. What's it look like at, just going back to the roster, the tight ends, how did they develop? Is Logan Thomas, now there's not all these things are going to be answered in the affirmative or go the way that everybody wants it to, because it never goes like that. It rarely goes like that. And I think the health is going to be always a factor, but defensively, how quickly does Forbes become the playmaker they hope he is? How quickly does Quan Martin become the versatile piece they hope he is? And, and what does that mean when he is? And does Cody Barton, is he any different? I mean, shoot, they didn't have Cole Holcomb for most of the year, and the defense still did a nice job. So now you have a guy that probably is around the same level. And Barton, is he an ascending player, or we don't? And there are questions.
And you get Jamin. Hopefully the Jamin that ended last year is the one that starts this year and he keeps ascending, because Jamin at the beginning of last year was bad, and by the end of last year he was good. Yeah. And if you get good Jamin, that seems. I don't know, John, that seems good to me.
Right. And so there's a lot of ways that it can go with the D, but then I think you look at what's the schedule look like, and we'll find that out more later this week. We know the teams are playing, and on paper, it's a tougher schedule, but part of that is because the NFC East was so good. But you're also getting, it's just going to be an interesting one. But again, that the schedule thing is hard because you never know how a team looks until you play them. You can't say in April or May what it's going to look like in October, because we don't know, right? But it on paper is a tougher schedule. But again, we'll see. But I do think there's reason to believe that they will be better, and I think there's reason to say, but you got to. There are other things you say, but this has to go right for them, and this person has to make an impact, whether it's Bieniemy or Howell, or Brian Robinson. Here's another one. He was shot, and he missed 4 games because of it. And then it's not like you come back and you're who you were before you got shot. It takes a little bit of time. So where is he at with everything? And does this help him? We'll see. So I think there's there are reasons where you can say, if you want to be optimistic, you can say that. And I think, and if you have concerns, that those are legit too, because again, we're not talking about a 12-win team. We're talking about 8-1, which means you can go this way, you can go this way. But
Yeah, I
they
was going
did,
to
like,
also
I think
say,
the enemy thing is a big change for them.
yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. And I think one of the big things for me is like when you look around the division, I think nationally, the teams in the division made a lot of like big moves.
Right. Right.
Waller to New York, obviously Philly's draft and the free agents are able to bring in, and Dallas trading for Cooks and kind of making more splash/flash moves. And I think a lot of people naturally say, well, obviously those teams are going to be better. They've added better players, and there's a huge element to that. But then, again, I think back to the Giants last year, and I remember on our podcast we did like a recap of the Giants offseason. And the one thing we settled on is, well, like, they've changed both coordinators and they've got a new head coach. And that was the most significant change in those teams, right? So, again, I think people forget about EB and what he could
Right.
potentially bring. But I also think that, like, to your point, like, everything about this roster is a projection. Like, I personally think that Quan Martin, excuse me, is like maybe the most significant piece for this defense. But like you said, even that piece, which is a second round pick, is a projection because
Yeah.
it gives you depth even at linebacker, having a piece like that, because it maybe Forrest can move in there, or
Right.
Percy Butler can play the post and Cam. So, but like that that linchpin for the defense is in a player who's 22 or 23 years old. So I think there are a lot of reasons to be optimistic, a lot of things to be very excited about, but ultimately it's like we don't know, and there are good bets and there are bad bets, and sometimes I think the optimism is a little unrealistic for the local media, and I'm including myself in that because I'm also more optimistic than 27th, quite frankly. But
Right.
you never know.
Yeah.
I just would like to like point out real quick. I'm not saying that people should have them top 10, right?
No.
I just think that it should, like, there's a really good chance that they finish around the same record that they do last year, maybe a little bit better. If all the things that we're talking about go well, they probably still cap out an 11 or 12 win team. Like, I'm not telling you this is a 14 win, 1 seed
Right.
football team if everything goes unbelievable and Sam Howell is like literally young Russell Wilson. Sure, we can talk about it, but that's not what I'm projecting. I am like miffed at the fact that people think this is going to be one of the worst teams in the league when it is largely unchanged in some key, like, set the floor spots from last year, and it has changed in the spots that were trouble in ways that obviously in May we think are better, but we'll see. Thanks for watching this clip of Take Command. First, why don't you like it? It lets other people know that it was good, and then they should watch it too. And Logan, we have a new exclusive home for full episodes.
We do. 1067 The Fans YouTube page. Go check it out and please subscribe.
Yeah, do what Logan said.
Do it.
Very, very smart.